Hello everyone. Welcome to today's story. What happens when love and fate collide in the most unexpected of ways? Can a bond so strong survive the unthinkable? Today, we dive into a heart-wrenching story of a young couple, Tu and Alex, whose lives are forever changed by a tragic accident. Will Tu survive the crash? And if she does, can their unborn child make it through the chaos too? In a race against time, Alex faces the ultimate test of love, courage, and sacrifice. But can he hold on to hope as everything seems to slip through his fingers? Stay with us until the end to find out how this story unfolds, because what happens next will leave you speechless. And before we dive in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Let's reach 10,000 followers together. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. The piercing scream of the ambulance sirens tore through the night, a relentless sound that mirrored the pounding in Alex's chest. His hands, still stained with Tuna's blood, trembled as he clutched her limp hand, willing her to stay with him. The bright neon lights from the hospital sign flickered like desperate heartbeats, casting a stark, red and white glow on Alex's pale face. His mind was spinning, a whirl of fragmented images. Tuna laughing just moments before, her hand brushing over her rounded belly, then the screech of tires, the sickening thud, and the way her body collapsed into his arms. Lifeless. Tuna's head lolled to one side, her hair damp with sweat, her lips drained of color. The faint rise and fall of her chest seemed so fragile, as if it could vanish in an instant. Every second felt like an eternity. "Stay with me, Tuna," Alex whispered, his voice cracking as he squeezed her hand. Desperate for a sign, anything that would prove she was still there. But she remained unresponsive, her eyes closed, her face pale. They rushed through the emergency room doors, the cold antiseptic air hitting Alex's senses. Nurses and doctors swarmed around them, their voices clipped with urgency. "Get her to trauma room 3. Start oxygen now. Call OB immediately. She's pregnant." But Alex couldn't move. He was frozen, the weight of the situation suffocating him. He wanted to scream at them to hurry, to save her, but his voice had vanished, swallowed by the sterile white walls that seemed to mock his helplessness. He watched, helpless, as they worked to save her life, knowing he couldn't do a thing. Alex was shoved back as the doctors and nurses swarmed around Tuna, their hands moving with mechanical precision, but he couldn't tear his eyes away. His chest felt tight, his breath shallow, as if the air itself was too heavy to inhale. He was too numb to scream, too weak to move. All he could do was watch the chaotic scene unfold before him, his hands still trembling, stained with the blood of the woman he loved. The waiting room felt like a prison cell. Every second that ticked by felt like an eternity. The walls seemed to close in on him as the clock on the wall ticked away, each second a reminder that he was helpless. His phone buzzed with messages from friends, family, but he couldn't bring himself to answer. The world outside had stopped existing. It was just him, the sterile walls, and Tuna, somewhere on the other side, fighting for her life. His thoughts raced back to earlier that day. He could still see the smile on her face as she brushed her hand over her belly, her eyes sparkling with excitement. They'd been so close to bringing their dream to life, a family. The future they'd planned together. He'd promised her that they would have a little house with a sunny kitchen and a crib by the window. Now, all of that seemed so distant, so fragile. He pressed his palms into his eyes, trying to push away the overwhelming weight of it all. "Stay with me, Tuna, please." The door to the waiting room opened, and a nurse stepped in. "She's stable for now," she said, her voice steady, but there was an underlying tension. "But we need to move her to the surgical unit. There's internal bleeding and we're concerned about the baby. The doctor will explain more." Alex barely heard her as his heart leapt in his chest. She's still alive. She's still here. But the fear in the nurse's voice cut deeper than any words she could have said. The antiseptic smell in the surgical prep room hit Alex like a cold wave as he stepped inside. The harsh fluorescent lights above cast an unforgiving glow over everything, making the room feel even colder, more sterile. Tuna lay motionless on the table. Connected to a network of tubes and monitors, her face pale against the white sheets. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound that grounded him, the rhythmic pulse of life, fragile and tenuous. Alex moved closer to her, his fingers brushing gently against her hand. "I'm right here, Tuna. I'm not going anywhere," he whispered, his voice shaking as he fought to keep the tears at bay. He tried to remember the feel of her touch, her laughter, the warmth of her presence in their shared moments. But everything felt like a fading dream now. The door opened, and Dr. Lambert entered. He was a tall, stern man with a face that revealed little, but his eyes carried the weight of something Alex didn't want to acknowledge. He stepped closer, his hands pulling on gloves as he approached Tuna's bed. "Mr. Carter," the doctor began slowly, his voice low. "Tuna's injuries are severe. She has multiple fractures and significant internal bleeding near the uterus. The baby's condition is critical. We'll do everything we can, but I need you to prepare yourself." Alex felt a cold wave of terror wash over him. The doctor's words echoed in his mind. But it was the final sentence that hit him the hardest. He wanted to scream, to demand that they save her, that they save both of them. But the words stuck in his throat. "Prepare myself for what?" he whispered, his voice barely audible, trembling. Dr. Lambert's expression softened for a brief moment. "For the possibility that we might not be able to save both." The room seemed to spin, the walls closing in on him. Alex felt the air leave his lungs, the heaviness of the words pressing down on his chest. He didn't know how to process it, how to even breathe with that fear hanging over him. Alex's heart raced in his chest as he stood there, frozen in the sterile room, the doctor's words replaying in his mind like an endless loop. "Prepare yourself." The words had cut deeper than any injury. He couldn't comprehend them, couldn't accept them. His mind was consumed with visions of a future without Tuna, without their baby, without the life they had built in their hearts. For a long moment he just stood there, staring at Tuna's unconscious form, the machines beeping softly in the background, keeping her tethered to life. She was still here, still fighting. But he couldn't shake the cold, gnawing fear that one wrong move, one slight change in her condition could take her away forever. But then, something changed. The door to the room opened again, and a nurse entered, her face a little softer than before. "Mr. Carter, we've stabilized her for the moment," she said quickly, but there was still a hint of caution in her voice. "We're moving her to the ICU. The bleeding is slowed, but she's still in critical condition." Alex's chest tightened as he fought to process the nurse's words. It wasn't the perfect news he'd been praying for, but it was a glimmer of hope in the midst of overwhelming uncertainty. "The baby?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The nurse's expression faltered for just a second before she answered. "The heartbeat is weak, but still there. We're doing everything we can." Alex squeezed her hand, his grip firm as if to reassure himself, as if the mere act of holding on could somehow pull her back from the brink. "I'm not leaving," he said quietly, his voice filled with a mixture of determination and fear. "I promised her. I'm not leaving." The nurse nodded, and without another word, she guided him out of the room, leaving him alone with his thoughts and his fear. He stood in the hallway, staring at the doors to the ICU, feeling like he was waiting for a piece of his soul to return to him. The minutes dragged on, each second heavier than the last. Alex paced back and forth outside the ICU, his mind a storm of thoughts he couldn't control. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. All he could do was wait, trying to steady his shaking hands, trying to silence the suffocating panic that threatened to overtake him. Every time a nurse passed, every time the door to the ICU creaked open, his heart leapt into his throat, only to sink back down when no new information came. He kept seeing Tu Na's face, her eyes sparkling as they'd made plans together, as they'd laughed over trivial things, like baby names. He could almost hear her voice, calling to him, reassuring him that everything would be fine. But now, that voice was just a memory, a painful reminder of what was at stake. He couldn't lose her. He wouldn't. Just when the silence of the waiting room became unbearable, the door to the ICU opened again. The nurse stepped out, her face more composed than before, but the weight of the situation still hung in her eyes. "She's stable for now," she said, her words steady but laced with urgency. "But we're not out of the woods yet. We still need to monitor her vitals closely. The next 24 hours are crucial." Alex nodded, feeling as if the world had been momentarily lifted off his shoulders. He couldn't breathe easy yet, but at least there was hope. He wasn't ready to accept the possibility of losing her. He couldn't be. "Can I see her?" he asked, his voice hoarse from the strain of holding back his emotions. The nurse hesitated for a moment before giving a small nod. "You can go in for a few minutes, but only if you're ready. She's heavily sedated." Alex didn't need to be told twice. He rose from his chair, his legs a little unsteady beneath him, but the pull to see Tu Na was stronger than any weakness. He needed to see her. He needed to know she was still here, still fighting. As he stepped into the ICU room, the soft beeping of the heart monitor greeted him. Tu Na lay in the bed, pale and motionless, but still alive. Alex's heart ached as he took her hand gently in his. He leaned down, his forehead brushing hers as he whispered softly, "I'm here. I won't leave you." Her breathing was shallow, but the steady rhythm of the monitor gave him hope. She was still here, and as long as she was, he wouldn't give up. Hours passed, though Alex barely noticed the time. He couldn't look away from Tu Na, even as the beeping of the monitors began to fade into the background of his mind. His eyes never left her face, watching for any sign of life, any movement, any indication that she might come back to him. But she remained still, the same pale color on her skin, the same quiet stillness in her body. Yet somehow, she was still with him, He refused to leave her side, even when nurses suggested that he get some rest. The fatigue weighed on him like a physical burden, but it was nothing compared to the weight of not knowing whether or not she would wake up. "I promised you, Tuna," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll stay right here, just like I said I would. We'll get through this. I'll never leave you." His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. He spoke about the plans they had made, how they would decorate the nursery together, what color to paint the walls, what kind of music they would play for the baby. He spoke of their future, of their dreams. He needed to believe that there was still a future, that she was still fighting for it as much as he was. Just as he finished speaking, a soft flutter of movement caught his attention. His heart skipped a beat. Her eyelids fluttered, a faint twitch of her fingers. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was enough to fill him with hope. "Tuna," he whispered, leaning closer, his voice breaking. "Can you hear me?" She didn't respond, but the faintest breath, a soft exhale, made him hold his own breath in return. For a moment, the world seemed to still, the chaos of the hospital fading into the background, leaving only the two of them in the quiet of the room. Then, as if in response, Tuna's fingers twitched again, and Alex felt his chest tighten with a mix of fear and relief. She was still here. She was still fighting. And in that moment, Alex realized that this was the moment they'd both been waiting for. This was the fragile thread of hope he had been desperately clinging to. The love they shared was a force that couldn't be broken, not even by this. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a soft glow through the blinds of the ICU. The room, though still dim, felt different somehow. Lighter, as if the world outside had started to breathe again. The monitors beeped steadily, marking the passage of time, and Alex sat at Tuna's side, holding her hand, unwilling to leave even for a moment. For the first time in what felt like forever, his mind began to drift away from the storm of fear and uncertainty. He found himself thinking about the future again, imagining a life beyond these sterile walls, beyond the terror of the past few days. "Remember when we argued about baby names?" Tuna's voice, soft and strained, cut through his thoughts. Her eyes fluttered open, a slight, tired smile tugging at her lips. Alex's heart leapt. "You're awake," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes brimming with tears. "I've been right here, waiting for you." Tuna's gaze was distant, but the recognition in her eyes was enough to make Alex feel like the weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. She had made it through. They had made it through. "I thought I wouldn't wake up," she murmured, her voice barely audible, her lips trembling with each word. Alex squeezed her hand gently, a smile breaking through the exhaustion and relief that had been building inside him. "You're not going anywhere," he whispered fiercely, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I told you, you don't get to leave me." Her smile, though faint, was the most beautiful thing Alex had ever seen. He knew then, in that quiet moment, that they had fought for this, for her, for their family. And though they weren't out of the woods yet, they were no longer alone in their fight. Dr. Lambert entered quietly, a rare smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Her vitals are improving," he said, looking at Alex. "The baby's heartbeat is stronger. It's still early, but I think we've passed the worst of it." Alex let out a shaky breath, relief washing over him in waves. He held Tuna's hand tightly, as if he could keep her from slipping away, though he knew the hardest part was still ahead. But in that moment, as Tuna looked up at him with those tired eyes, he finally allowed himself to breathe. There was still a future waiting for them, a future they could build together. They weren't out of danger yet, but they were a step closer to healing.
Tử Na, một người phụ nữ mang thai gặp tai nạn nghiêm trọng khi được đưa vào bệnh viện trong tình trạng nguy kịch. Chồng cô, Alex, không rời xa dù chỉ một giây, phải đối mặt với sự sợ hãi, sự bất lực của bác sĩ thông báo rằng cả cô và đứa trẻ đều đang gặp nguy hiểm. Trong suốt những thời gian phút căng thẳng, Alex không ngừng cầu nguyện, động viên Tử Na và không từ bỏ hy vọng. Sau một thời gian dài chiến đấu, Tử Na bắt đầu hồi phục, trái tim đứa bé dần ổn định. Câu chuyện chứng minh sức mạnh của tình yêu, lòng kiên cường và sự hy sinh khi một người đàn ông sẵn sàng làm mọi thứ để cứu lấy gia đình của mình, dù đối mặt với nghịch cảnh lớn lao.